I doubled the dose in his green juice this morning. Victoria's voice sliced through the darkness like a blade dipped in honey. By next week, the doctors will call it heart failure. No one questions a dead billionaire's heart. Jonathan Sterling stopped breathing. His own wife. The woman who kissed him goodbye 12 hours ago. The woman he had built an empire to protect. She was killing him slowly, and she sounded bored doing it. And if he doesn't die fast enough? That voice belonged to Daniel. His brother. His blood. Then we speed things up. I've done this before, remember. Before you continue this incredible journey, I invite you to subscribe and follow this story until the very end. Comment below the city you are watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Now let us begin. The hand came out of nowhere. Jonathan had just stepped through the service entrance of his Beverly Hills mansion when fingers clamped around his wrist like a vice. Before he could shout, before his brain could even process the attack, someone yanked him sideways into the laundry room and shoved him against the wall. A palm pressed hard against his mouth. "Don't breathe." Rosa Martinez, his housekeeper, stood inches from his face. Her eyes were wild with terror. "If they hear you, you die tonight. Nod if you understand." Jonathan nodded. Rosa's hand trembled against his lips, but her voice stayed steady. "Your wife and your brother are in the study. I heard everything. You need to hear it too. But if you make one sound if they know you're here, they will kill you before the sun comes up." Jonathan's mind raced. This was insane. He had flown back from New York 3 days early to surprise Victoria for their anniversary. He had imagined champagne roses, maybe that smile she used to give him before everything went cold. Instead, his housekeeper was telling him his wife wanted him dead. "Show me," he whispered. Rosa grabbed his arm and pulled him through the service corridor. She moved like a ghost, avoiding floorboards. Jonathan never knew could creak ducking beneath windows he had never noticed were visible from the study. 7 years she had worked in this house. 7 years she had learned its secrets while he learned nothing about her. They stopped outside the study door. Candlelight flickered through the gap. Victoria's perfume hung in the air like poison. "He actually believes I love him." Victoria laughed softly. "Every morning I put that green juice in his hands and he thanks me. He kisses my cheek and tells me I take such good care of him. It's pathetic, really." "How much longer?" Daniel's voice. Eager. Hungry. "The specialist in Vancouver said 3 more weeks, maybe 4. His symptoms will get worse. Dizziness, tremors, confusion. His doctors will run every test in the book and find nothing specific. Just another stressed billionaire whose heart gave out." Jonathan's legs nearly buckled. The dizziness he had ignored for months. The trembling hands, Victoria said, were just stress. The weakness she blamed on overwork. It wasn't burnout. It was arsenic. Served with a kiss at his own breakfast table. "And once he's gone?" Daniel asked. "We wait 6 months. The grieving widow finds comfort in her brother-in-law's support. We announce our engagement. The tabloids write love stories. By next year, Sterling Industries belongs to us." "What about loose ends?" Victoria's heels clicked against the hardwood as she moved closer to Daniel. "Morrison is paid. The housekeeper is an idiot who barely speaks English. The doctors see what I tell them to see. There are no loose ends." Rosa's jaw tightened beside Jonathan. Her fingers dug into his arm hard enough to bruise. "I want to move faster," Daniel said. 3 weeks feels like forever." "Patience." Victoria's voice dropped to something intimate, something that made Jonathan's stomach turn. "I killed Richard in 18 months. Jonathan will be done in 6. That's already ahead of schedule." Jonathan stopped breathing. Richard, Victoria's first husband, the real estate developer who died of heart failure 4 years before they met. The tragedy that made her seem vulnerable wounded someone Jonathan wanted to protect. She had murdered him too. Rosa pulled Jonathan back through the corridor before his legs gave out completely. She dragged him through the service entrance into the cool night air, her grip the only thing keeping him upright. "My car," she hissed. "Behind the guest house. Move!" Jonathan stumbled forward. The world tilted and swam. Everything he thought he knew was collapsing like a building with its foundations ripped out. They were halfway across the lawn when floodlights exploded to life. Jonathan froze. Rosa yanked him behind a hedge, forcing him down into the dirt. Footsteps crunched on gravel 20 feet away. Perimeter check. A security guard's voice. Martinez, the night shift leader. Mrs. Sterling wants extra patrols tonight. Says she's worried about her husband. Another guard laughed. Worried about his money, more like. Shut up and walk. The footsteps moved closer. Jonathan pressed his face into the earth, tasting soil and fear. Rosa's body covered his, shielding him from view. Her heart pounded against his back. The guards passed within 10 feet of their position. Rosa didn't move for another full minute. When she finally pulled Jonathan to his feet, her face was pale but determined. Go, now, don't look back. They reached her car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with rust on the doors and a crack running across the windshield. Jonathan hesitated at the passenger door. Get in, Rosa snapped. Your Mercedes has GPS. Your phone pings towers. That watch costs more than my house and can be tracked from space. Right now, everything you own is a leash. Jonathan climbed in. The seat groaned beneath him. A rosary swung from the rearview mirror. Rosa started the engine and pulled out through a service road Jonathan had never used. The mansion shrank in the mirror. 47 rooms, tennis courts, a pool he never swam in, a life that was never real. I need to call the police. Jonathan reached for his phone. Morrison owes me. He'll... Rosa slapped the phone out of his hand. Morrison is bought. Her voice cracked like a whip. Your brother paid him 6 months ago. You call that number and Daniel knows exactly where you are within the hour. Is that what you want? Morrison is my friend. We went to Harvard together. He's a man who likes money. Rosa's eyes never left the road. Your brother has more of it now. Loyalty is expensive, Mr. Sterling, and you're not the one paying anymore. Jonathan stared at the phone on the floor of the car. 3 days ago, he would have trusted Morrison with his life. 3 days ago, he would have trusted Victoria with his soul. How do you know all this? Rosa laughed bitterly. Because rich people think the help is furniture. They talk in front of me like I'm not there. 6 months I've been hearing pieces. Phone calls, arguments. Victoria whispering to your brother when she thought the house was empty. Tonight, I heard everything. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I tried. Rosa's voice broke for the first time. 2 months ago, I told you to see a different doctor. You laughed. Last month, I suggested you take a vacation. You said the company needed you. 3 weeks ago, I said Mrs. Sterling seemed distant. You told me to mind my own business. Jonathan closed his eyes. He remembered those conversations, brief, dismissive, forgotten before they ended. Rosa had been trying to save his life, and he had treated her like background noise. I'm sorry. Save your apologies. Rosa's grip tightened on the wheel. Right now, we survive. Feel guilty later. They drove in silence for 20 minutes, the neighborhoods transforming with every mile. Mansions became houses. Houses became apartments. Apartments became buildings with bars on the windows and graffiti on the walls. Jonathan's phone buzzed on the floor. Rosa glanced at it. Don't. It might be important. It's a trap. Jonathan picked up the phone anyway. Victoria's name glowed on the screen. 15 missed calls. 23 text messages. Baby, where are you? I'm worried sick. Jonathan, please call me. I love you. The police are looking for you. Everyone is so scared. Please come home. Jonathan read each message with growing nausea. The woman who was poisoning him to death was texting hearts and prayer emojis. She was worried about him. She loved him. She wanted him to come home so she could finish killing him. Throw it away, Rosa said. I need to throw it away, or I stop this car and leave you on the side of the road. Jonathan looked at her. She wasn't bluffing. This woman who cleaned his toilets and washed his sheets was the only person in the world he could trust, and she was threatening to abandon him if he didn't listen. He rolled down the window and threw the phone into the darkness. The watch, too. Jonathan hesitated. His father had given him this Patek Philippe the day he made his first million. It was worth $200,000 and a lifetime of memories. Now, Mr. Sterling. He unclasped the watch and threw it after the phone. Wallet. Gone. Wedding ring. Jonathan looked down at the platinum band Victoria had slipped onto his finger 10 years ago. She had cried during the ceremony. Happy tears, she said. He believed her. He twisted the ring off and threw it into the night. Good. Rosa's voice softened slightly. Jonathan Sterling doesn't exist anymore. Right now, you're nobody. And nobody is very hard to kill. They arrived at Rosa's house shortly before dawn. The building was small, sandwiched between two others, on a street where half the streetlights didn't work. Rosa parked in a narrow alley and led Jonathan through a back door. Inside, everything was immaculate. Worn furniture, faded curtains, but every surface was clean. Photographs lined the walls. A young boy at various ages, growing taller with each frame. Your son? Jonathan asked. Miguel. Rosa's voice warmed for the first time that night. He's 17 now, staying with his grandmother this week. Jonathan studied the photographs. A gap-toothed smile at 5, a soccer trophy at 10, a young man in a cap and gown at 16. He looks happy. He's alive. Rosa moved to the kitchen and started boiling water. That's enough. Jonathan sank onto a couch that sagged beneath his weight. The adrenaline that had carried him through the night was fading fast, and in its place came something worse. His hands began to shake, his vision blurred. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cool air. The poison? Rosa said without turning around. Your body was managing it slowly. Tonight's stress accelerated the reaction. How bad? Rosa didn't answer. She pressed a cold cloth to his forehead and forced him to drink water mixed with something that tasted like charcoal. What is this? Activated charcoal. It absorbs toxins. I learned it in nursing school. You were a nurse. For 2 years. Dropped out when my mother got sick. Rosa's hands worked quickly, efficiently. Life doesn't wait for dreams, Mr. Sterling. Some of us can't afford to finish things. Jonathan's fever spiked within the hour. Reality fractured into nightmares. He saw Victoria smiling as she handed him the green juice. He saw Daniel laughing as he signed documents transferring the company. He saw Captain Morrison loading a gun and walking toward Rosa's front door. They're coming. Jonathan grabbed Rosa's arm, his grip weak but desperate. I saw them. Morrison. He knows where we are. You're hallucinating. Rosa pried his fingers loose. The fever is making you see things. No, they're coming. We have to run. We have to... Jonathan! Rosa's voice cut through the panic. Look at me. He forced his eyes to focus. I've been invisible my whole life, Rosa said quietly. Cleaning houses, serving food, washing clothes. People look right through me. That's my power. They don't see me as a threat because they don't see me at all. Right now, that invisibility is the only thing keeping you alive. Trust it. Trust me. Jonathan's grip relaxed. His breathing slowed. Why are you doing this? The question came out broken, barely a whisper. Why risk everything for me? Rosa was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with memory. 7 years ago, my son was dying. His heart was failing. The surgery cost $180,000. I had $3,000 in savings and no insurance that would cover it. I was going to watch my child die because I couldn't afford to save him. Jonathan searched his memory and found nothing. An anonymous donor paid for everything. Rosa's eyes glistened. The hospital wouldn't tell me the name, but I saw the paperwork. The money came from Sterling Holdings. Jonathan remembered now. A phone call from his accountant about a medical charity deduction. He had approved it without reading the details. One signature among 100 that week. That was you. That was my son's life. Rosa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You saved him without wanting anything back. You didn't even know you did it. That's the man I'm protecting tonight. Not the billionaire. The man who saved a stranger's child because it was the right thing to do. Jonathan lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling of this small house that suddenly felt larger than his mansion ever had. Miguel, he said softly. What does he want to be? Rosa smiled. A doctor. He wants to save lives the way his was saved. He will. Jonathan's voice was fading. With a mother like you, he will. Rosa pulled a blanket over him and stood. Sleep. Tomorrow we start fighting back. Jonathan drifted off to the sound of her footsteps, checking locks and closing curtains. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the photograph of Miguel on the wall, smiling at a future his mother had fought to give him. He woke to shouting. Rosa was at the window, her body tense, her hand gripping a kitchen knife. What is it? Jonathan tried to sit up, but his body refused. Car outside. Been sitting there for 10 minutes. Engine running. Jonathan's blood went cold. Can you see who's inside? Windows are tinted. The car door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, walking directly toward Rosa's front door. Rosa moved to the entrance knife behind her back. The knock came. 3 sharp raps. Rosa opened the door a crack. Can I help you? I'm looking for my cousin. The man's voice was gruff. Maria said she was staying here. No Maria here. You have the wrong house. A long pause. You sure about that? Very sure. The man leaned closer, trying to see past Rosa into the house. Jonathan pressed himself against the wall out of sight, barely breathing. Nice place, the man said. You live alone? My husband works nights. He'll be home soon. Another pause. Then footsteps retreating. The car door slammed. Engine revved. Tires squealed. Rosa closed the door and leaned against it, her whole body shaking. Wrong house, she whispered. Just wrong house. But her eyes said she didn't believe it. Jonathan spent the next 2 days recovering. Rosa nursed him with a fierce competence that surprised them both. She monitored his pulse, forced him to drink water, and watched his color slowly return to normal. On the 3rd morning, she handed him a burner phone. There's an FBI agent named Catherine Walsh, Organized Crime Division. She hates dirty cops more than she hates criminals. No connection to Morrison. No connection to your brother. How do you know about her? Rosa's smile was grim. Because when you're invisible, you learn to find the people who might actually help. Jonathan dialed. Walsh? Agent Walsh, my name is Jonathan Sterling. I know what the news is saying about me. I know they think I've had a breakdown, but I need to tell you what's really happening. Silence. Then, I'm listening. Jonathan told her everything. Victoria's confession, Daniel's involvement, Morrison's betrayal, the previous husband who died the same way, the poison he could still taste every time he swallowed. When he finished, Walsh's voice was cold and professional. Can you prove any of this? Not yet. Then here's your problem. Right now, you're a missing billionaire with a documented history of overwork. Your wife is the grieving victim. Your brother is the concerned family member. Captain Morrison is leading the search. If you surface without evidence, they'll have you committed before sunset. You'll spend your remaining weeks in a psychiatric facility while your wife takes everything you ever built. What do I need? Documentation of the poison, financial records linking payments to Morrison, physical evidence of conspiracy. Without proof, you're just a sick man making accusations against his loving family. And if I get proof, then I'll bring the full weight of the federal government down on everyone involved. Your wife, your brother, Morrison, anyone who touched this. The line went dead. Jonathan stared at the phone. She's not exactly warm. She's honest. Rosa took the phone back. That's more valuable. Jonathan stood and walked to the window, staring at a neighborhood he'd never known existed. Somewhere across the city, Victoria was playing the grieving wife. Daniel was consolidating control of his company. Morrison was tightening the net. I need evidence from inside that house. They'll recognize you. They'll recognize me. Jonathan turned to face her. But they won't recognize you. You're just the maid. Furniture. They talk like you're not even in the room. Rosa understood immediately. Her expression hardened into something dangerous. You want me to go back? I want you to become invisible again. Watch. Listen. Record everything. Rosa looked at Miguel's photograph on the wall. Her son's future. Her life's work. If they catch me, they won't just fire me. They'll kill me. I know. Jonathan's voice was steady. And I have no right to ask. You've already saved my life twice. You owe me nothing. Rosa was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a decision already made. I owe you, my son. That debt doesn't expire. She picked up her keys. I'll go back tomorrow. Tell them I was visiting family. Victoria will believe it. She thinks that's all Mexican women do anyway. Rosa. Save it. She opened the door. Rest today. Eat everything in my refrigerator. Tomorrow, we take your life back. She left. Jonathan stood alone in the small house surrounded by photographs of a family he'd never noticed. The television flickered silently, showing news coverage of his disappearance. Victoria crying on camera. Daniel comforting her. Morrison promising to bring him home. His phone buzzed. The burner. Unknown number. Jonathan answered slowly. Hello. Mr. Sterling. The voice was male, unfamiliar, ice cold. We know your housekeeper is helping you. We know you're in South Central. We tracked her car from your estate. Jonathan's heart stopped. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come home. You're going to tell everyone you had a mental breakdown. And then you're going to die quietly like a good husband so your wife can move on with her life. And if I don't, then Rosa Martinez dies first, slowly. And you'll hear every second of it before we come for you. The line went dead. Jonathan stood frozen, the phone burning in his hand. They knew. They were coming. And the only person standing between him and death was somewhere out there driving back toward the people who wanted to destroy them both. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. Every creak of Rosa's small house sounded like footsteps. Every passing car sounded like death arriving. He sat in darkness with a kitchen knife in his hand, waiting for a door to break down that never did. Rosa returned at 6 in the morning, her face gray with exhaustion. They didn't come, Jonathan said. They wanted you scared. Rosa dropped her keys on the table. Scared men make mistakes. That call was a test. How do you know? Because if they knew exactly where you were, you'd already be dead. Jonathan let the knife fall. His hands were shaking again, but not from poison this time. Pure fear. Rosa sat across from him. I'm going back to the mansion today. I called Victoria last night, told her I was visiting family in Tijuana. She believed me. She always believes the simple story about the Mexican maid. It's too dangerous. That phone call changes nothing. Rosa's voice was steel. They suspect I helped you. They don't have proof. If I run now, they have proof. If I go back, I'm just the stupid housekeeper who doesn't know anything. Jonathan grabbed her wrist. Rosa, listen to me. These people killed Victoria's first husband. They're poisoning me. They bought a police captain. They won't hesitate to kill you. Rosa looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. 7 years ago, you didn't hesitate to save my son. You didn't even know his name. You just signed a check because a stranger's child was dying. She pulled free gently. Now it's my turn to not hesitate. She stood and walked to her bedroom. 20 minutes later, she emerged in her uniform. Black dress, white apron, hair pulled back tight. The invisible woman. There's food in the refrigerator. Don't answer the door. Don't use the phone unless it's me calling. The number will show as unknown. Rosa, if I'm not back by midnight, call Agent Walsh. Tell her everything, then run and don't look back." She left before he could argue. The hours crawled like years. Jonathan paced Rosa's small living room until he wore a path in the carpet. He watched the news where Victoria continued her performance of grief. He studied the photographs of Miguel, this boy whose life he had saved without knowing, wondering if he had just sent Miguel's mother to her death. At 2:47 p.m., the burner phone rang. Jonathan nearly dropped it. "Rosa, I'm inside." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Victoria hugged me when I arrived. She said she was so glad I was back. She needs support during this difficult time." Jonathan's stomach turned. "She's using you for cover. She's using everyone. But I found something. There's a locked drawer in Mr. Daniel's study. I've never seen it before. He keeps checking it when he thinks no one is watching." "Can you get into it?" "Not without the key. But I know where he keeps it, in his jacket pocket, the gray one he wears every Thursday." "Today is Thursday." "I know." The line went dead. Jonathan stared at the phone. Rosa was inside the lion's den hunting for evidence, while surrounded by people who would kill her without blinking. And all he could do was wait. At 6:15 p.m. the phone rang again. "I have it." Rosa's breath was ragged. "I got into the drawer. There are documents, bank transfers, dates, amounts, a name I don't recognize. Someone called the specialist in Vancouver." Jonathan's heart pounded. "That's the poison supplier. Victoria mentioned him." "There's more. A folder labeled Morrison. Payment schedules going back 8 months. $50,000 a month. They've been paying him since before your symptoms started. Can you photograph everything?" "Already did. But Jonathan, there's something else. A letter. Handwritten. From Victoria to Daniel." Rosa's voice cracked. "What does it say?" It says she's been planning this since before she married you. She targeted you specifically. There's a list of wealthy men she researched. You were at the top. Net worth, family connections, health history. She chose you like she was shopping for a car. Jonathan sank onto the couch. 10 years of marriage, the courtship, the wedding, the life they built together. All of it calculated, all of it fake. He was never a husband. He was a mark. "Get out of there," he whispered. "You have enough. Get out now." "I can't. Not yet. Daniel is having a meeting tonight. Someone is coming to the house. I heard him on the phone. He said the Sterling problem needs to be resolved permanently." "Rosa, that means they're planning to find me. You need to leave. Or it means I can record the meeting and give Walsh everything she needs to arrest them tonight." "It's too risky." "Everything is risky." Rosa's voice hardened. "You taught me that 7 years ago. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save what matters." The line went dead again. Jonathan threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the wall and landed on the carpet unbroken. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run to that mansion and drag Rosa out himself. But he couldn't. He was a ghost now, a dead man walking. If he showed his face, he would be dead for real within hours. All he could do was wait. At 9:23 p.m., his world collapsed for the second time. The phone rang. Jonathan grabbed it with trembling hands. "Rosa." "She's been discovered." Agent Walsh's voice was cold and clinical. "My surveillance team picked up chatter on Morrison's frequency. They found a recording device in Daniel Sterling's study. Your housekeeper is being detained." Jonathan stopped breathing. "Detained where?" "At the mansion. They haven't called police because they can't explain why she was recording. But that won't last. Morrison is on his way there now. He'll kill her. Probably. Then do something." "I can't." Walsh's voice carried no emotion. "I don't have enough evidence for a warrant. Everything Rosa collected is inadmissible because she obtained it illegally. If I move now, the case falls apart and your wife walks free." "I don't care about the case. Rosa is going to die." "Then you have a choice, Mr. Sterling. Save your housekeeper and lose your chance at justice. Or let events play out and hope she survives long enough for me to build a real case. Jonathan's mind raced. Rosa was going to die because she tried to save him. The woman who had given him everything, who had risked her son's future, who had believed in a version of him that he wasn't sure existed anymore. Tell me where Morrison is right now. Walsh paused. He left the precinct 12 minutes ago. He'll reach the mansion in approximately 20 minutes. I need a car, something untraceable. There's a gray sedan parked 2 blocks east of your location. Keys are in the wheel well. I had it placed there this morning in case of emergency. You knew this might happen. I prepare for every outcome. Walsh's voice softened slightly. Mr. Sterling, if you go to that mansion, you will likely die. You understand that? Jonathan was already moving toward the door. Rosa understood that when she went back. She did it anyway. Why? Jonathan paused with his hand on the knob. Because some debts can't be measured in money. He hung up and ran into the night. The sedan was exactly where Walsh said it would be. Jonathan found the keys, started the engine, and drove toward Beverly Hills, with his heart trying to break through his ribs. 18 minutes. That's how long he had before Morrison arrived. 18 minutes to reach a mansion he knew better than anyone, infiltrate a house full of people trying to kill him, and rescue a woman who had already sacrificed everything. He called Walsh from the road. I need a distraction, something that pulls security away from the East Wing. I can trigger a false alarm at the neighbor's property. It will draw at least 2 guards to investigate. Do it in 15 minutes. Understood. Walsh hesitated. Mr. Sterling, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen a lot of people make stupid decisions. What you're doing right now is the stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. Then why are you helping me? Because stupid and brave often look the same from a distance, and because that housekeeper of yours deserves better than dying in a mansion that never saw her as human. The line went dead. Jonathan pushed the accelerator to the floor. He reached the mansion at 9:51 p.m. The security lights blazed like an accusation, illuminating the perfectly manicured lawn he had paid a fortune to maintain. He parked the sedan 3 blocks away and approached on foot, staying in shadows he had never noticed during his years as master of this house. At 9:56 p.m., alarms began screaming at the Hendricks estate next door. Jonathan watched 2 guards sprint toward the sound, just as Walsh had promised. He slipped through the service entrance, the same door Rosa had pulled him through 5 days ago. The house was quieter than he expected. Voices came from the study, muffled but intense. Jonathan moved through the service corridor, his heart hammering so loud he was certain someone would hear it. He passed the laundry room where Rosa had saved his life. He passed the kitchen where Victoria had mixed poison into his morning routine. Every step felt like walking through a museum of his own betrayal. He found Rosa in the wine cellar. She was tied to a chair, her face bruised, her uniform torn. Daniel stood over her with his back to the door. Victoria watched from the corner, arms crossed, expression bored. I'll ask you one more time. Daniel's voice was ice. Where is my brother? Rosa spat blood onto the floor. I don't know. Daniel slapped her hard enough to rock the chair backward. You drove him away from this house. Your car was seen. We know you're hiding him. I drove home, alone. I don't know where your brother is. Victoria sighed. This is tedious. Morrison will be here in 10 minutes. Let him handle it. He has experience with people who don't want to talk. Jonathan's blood froze. Morrison would break Rosa. He would get a location, and then everyone Jonathan cared about would be dead before sunrise. He had to move now. Jonathan grabbed a wine bottle from the rack beside him and stepped into the cellar. Hello, Victoria. The reaction was instantaneous. Victoria screamed. Daniel spun around, his face draining of color. Rosa's eyes went wide with terror and something that might have been hope. Jonathan! Daniel's voice cracked. You're supposed to be dead. Jonathan moved closer, the bottle raised like a weapon. Sorry to disappoint you, little brother. Victoria recovered faster than Daniel. Her expression shifted from shock to calculation in seconds. "Baby, thank God you're alive. We've been so worried. I thought something terrible had happened to you." Something terrible did happen. Jonathan's voice was steady, despite the tremor in his hands. "My wife tried to kill me. My brother helped her. And now I find you torturing the only person who actually cared whether I lived or died." Daniel stepped between Jonathan and Rosa. "You don't understand what's happening here. Rosa is dangerous. She's been stealing from us, planting recording devices. She's trying to destroy our family." "Our family?" Jonathan laughed bitterly. "Our family consists of a wife who's been poisoning me for 6 months and a brother who's sleeping with her behind my back. That's not family, Daniel. That's a murder conspiracy." Victoria moved toward him, her hands raised in supplication. "Jonathan, you're confused. The stress, the pressure, it's affecting your mind. Let us help you. Let us take care of you." "Like you've been taking care of me?" Jonathan stepped back. "I heard everything, Victoria. That night in the study. The doubled dose. The heart failure that no one questions. The previous husband you killed the same way." Victoria's mask cracked. For a single moment, her true face showed through cold, calculating, utterly empty of love or remorse. "You stupid man." Her voice dropped the pretense entirely. "I gave you 10 years of my life. I smiled when you bored me. I pretended to care about your pathetic empire. And now you're going to ruin everything because you couldn't just die quietly like Richard did." Daniel grabbed a corkscrew from the wine rack. "This doesn't have to be complicated. There's no one here but us. We can end this now and tell Morrison that Rosa killed you during an escape attempt." Rosa struggled against her bonds. "Jonathan, run! Get out of here!" But Jonathan didn't run. He stood his ground as Daniel advanced the corkscrew, glinting in the dim light. "You always were the weak one." Daniel's smile was predatory. "Father knew it. Mother knew it. I've been cleaning up your messes since we were children." "You've been taking from me since we were children." Jonathan's grip tightened on the bottle. "Every opportunity I gave you, every chance to prove yourself, you used to get closer to what's mine. The company, the money, my wife." Daniel lunged. Jonathan swung the bottle. Glass shattered against Daniel's skull with a sound like a gunshot. His brother crumpled to the floor, blood streaming from a gash above his ear. Victoria screamed and ran for the door. Jonathan caught her arm and spun her around. "You're not going anywhere. Let me go." Victoria clawed at his face. "Morrison is coming. He'll be here any minute. You can't escape." "I don't need to escape." Jonathan held her firm despite her struggling. "I just need to survive long enough for the FBI to arrive." Victoria stopped fighting. Her eyes widened with genuine fear for the first time. "FBI." As if on cue, the sound of multiple vehicles screeching to a halt reached them from outside. Doors slammed. Voices shouted commands. "Agent Walsh has been monitoring this situation since yesterday." Jonathan released Victoria and stepped back. "Every word you said tonight was transmitted to a federal surveillance team. Every confession, every threat, every piece of evidence Rosa collected is now supported by live audio recording from the device I've been carrying since I walked through that door." Victoria's face went white. "That's not possible. Morrison controls the local police." Agent Walsh appeared at the cellar entrance, flanked by armed agents. "He doesn't control me." Jonathan moved to Rosa and began untying her bonds. Her wrists were raw, her face swollen, but her eyes were fierce with triumph. "You came back," she whispered. "You never left." Jonathan freed her hands and helped her stand. "Some debts can't be measured." Agents swarmed the cellar. Victoria was handcuffed while she screamed about lawyers and false accusations. Daniel was carried out on a stretcher, still unconscious from the blow to his head. And Jonathan Sterling stood in the ruins of his former life, holding on to the one person who had seen him clearly when everyone else saw only money. Walsh approached them as the chaos settled. "Morrison was arrested 6 blocks from here. He tried to run when he saw the federal vehicles. We found a weapon in his car and documentation linking him to 3 other suspicious deaths over the past decade. Jonathan nodded slowly. It's over. The arrests are just the beginning. There will be trials, depositions, media circuses. Your life is about to become very public and very complicated. Jonathan looked at Rosa. My life has already become very different. I think I can handle complicated. Walsh studied them both for a moment. Something almost like approval flickered across her professional expression. You did good, Mr. Sterling. Stupid, but good. She turned to Rosa. And you, Ms. Martinez. That was the bravest thing I've seen in 23 years of federal service. We could use someone like you. Rosa managed a tired smile. I'm just a housekeeper. No. Walsh shook her head. You're the woman who took down a conspiracy that would have succeeded if you'd stayed invisible. Don't ever call yourself just anything again. An agent escorted them out of the cellar through the house that had been Jonathan's prison dressed up as paradise. Victoria's screaming faded behind them. The flashing lights of federal vehicles painted the night in red and blue. Jonathan paused at the front door. One last look at 47 rooms of lies. Mr. Sterling. An agent held the door open. We need to get you to a hospital. The poison damage needs to be assessed. Jonathan turned away from the mansion. There's only one thing I need right now. He looked at Rosa, bruised and exhausted, and still standing. I need to make a phone call. There's a 17-year-old boy who deserves to know his mother is a hero. Rosa's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as Jonathan pulled out his phone and handed it to her. Call Miguel. Tell him everything. He should hear it from you. Rosa took the phone with trembling hands. For a moment she couldn't speak. Thank you, she finally whispered, for seeing me. Jonathan watched her dial, watched her face transform as her son's voice answered, watched a mother tell her child that she was coming home. And in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he thought he wanted, Jonathan Sterling finally understood what he actually needed. Not a mansion, not a fortune, not a name on a building, just someone who stayed when everyone else was pretending. The hospital kept Jonathan for 3 days. Tests confirmed arsenic poisoning at levels that would have killed him within another month. Doctors marveled that he was still walking, still talking, still alive. Jonathan knew the reason. She visited him every afternoon, bringing homemade soup and updates from Agent Walsh. On the 4th morning, Rosa arrived with news. Victoria made a deal. Her voice was carefully neutral. She's testifying against Daniel and Morrison in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jonathan stared at the ceiling. How reduced? 25 years instead of life. And Daniel? He's not taking deals. Says he'll fight everything in court. His lawyers are claiming you attacked him unprovoked. Jonathan laughed bitterly. Of course he is. Daniel never admitted to anything in his life. Rosa sat beside his bed. There's something else. A reporter wants to interview you. She says your story is the biggest thing since... No interviews. Jonathan's voice was firm. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The public will want to know what happened. The public wants entertainment. I don't owe them my trauma. Jonathan turned to face Rosa. The only person I owe anything to is sitting right here. Rosa's eyes glistened. You don't owe me anything, Jonathan. I did what anyone would... No. He reached for her hand. You did what no one else did. You saw through them when I was blind. You risked everything when I had nothing left. You stayed when the smart choice was to run. Rosa didn't pull away. What happens now? Now. Jonathan looked out the window at a city that looked completely different from the one he'd known a week ago. Now I figure out who Jonathan Sterling actually is when he's not being poisoned, betrayed, or hunted. That sounds like a big project. It is. Jonathan squeezed her hand. I was hoping you might help me figure it out. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried something new. something that sounded like possibility. I know a good place to start. Where? My house. Miguel is making dinner tonight. He wants to meet the man who saved his life and then showed up to save his mother's. Jonathan smiled. The first real smile in months. Tell him I'll bring dessert. Rosa stood to leave, but paused at the door. Jonathan? Yes. Whatever you figure out, whoever you decide to become, make sure it's someone worth being. You have a second chance now. Not many people get those. She left him alone with his thoughts and his healing body and a future that suddenly seemed terrifying and wonderful all at once. Jonathan looked at the empty chair beside his bed. For 10 years he had filled his life with people who wanted his money, his power, his name. And in the end, the only person who wanted him to survive was someone he had barely noticed until she became everything. The phone on his nightstand buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. Dinner is at 7. Miguel is making his grandmother's recipe. Don't be late. Jonathan typed back 3 words. I'll be there. He set down the phone and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he slept without dreaming of betrayal. Jonathan arrived at Rosa's house at exactly 7 o'clock. His hands were sweating as he walked up the narrow path carrying a box of pastries from a bakery he had never heard of until a nurse recommended it. The door opened before he could knock. Miguel stood in the doorway. 17 years old, tall, eyes that held the same quiet intensity as his mother's. You're Jonathan Sterling. I am. Miguel studied him for a long moment. My mom says you saved my life when I was 8. I signed a check. Your mother did the hard part. She also says you almost got her killed last week. Jonathan didn't flinch. That's true too. Miguel's expression didn't change. Then slowly he stepped aside. Dinner's getting cold. You coming in or what? Jonathan entered a home that smelled like garlic and cilantro, and something he couldn't name but recognized as love translated into food. Rosa stood at a small stove stirring a pot that steamed with promise. You found the place. She smiled without turning around. Your directions were perfect. Sit. Miguel, get our guest something to drink. Miguel grabbed a bottle from the refrigerator and set it in front of Jonathan with more force than necessary. We don't have fancy wine. Hope beer is okay. Beer is perfect. The dinner that followed was unlike anything Jonathan had experienced in his 45 years. No servants waiting in corners. No multiple courses arranged on plates like museum exhibits. No conversation designed to impress or manipulate. Just food. Just talk. Just 3 people sharing a table. Miguel asked questions with the directness of youth. How much money do you actually have? Miguel. Rosa's voice carried a warning. It's okay. Jonathan set down his fork. Honestly, I don't know anymore. The company is frozen pending investigation. My personal accounts are locked while they trace what Victoria might have already taken. Right now I have about $8,000 in a checking account my wife didn't know about. Miguel's eyes widened. You went from billionaire to $8,000. Turns out money is easier to lose than people think. That's insane. Miguel. Rosa's warning was sharper now. No, he's right. Jonathan smiled grimly. It is insane. A month ago, I had everything. Now I have almost nothing. Except... He looked at Rosa. Except the things that actually matter. Rosa held his gaze for a moment before turning back to her food. But Jonathan saw the slight flush in her cheeks. After dinner, Miguel cleared the table while Rosa walked Jonathan to the door. He likes you, she said quietly. He threatened me with his eyes 3 separate times. That means he likes you. If he didn't, he wouldn't bother. Jonathan laughed. It felt strange in his throat, like a muscle he had forgotten how to use. When can I see you again? Rosa hesitated. Jonathan, I need to say something. That sounds ominous. I'm not looking for a replacement life. Her voice was firm, but gentle. I don't want your money. I don't want your connections. I don't want to become the next woman living in a mansion while you work 100-hour weeks. I know. Do you? Because men like you, when they feel grateful, they try to fix things with gifts. They think money solves emotions. Jonathan stepped closer. I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to start something. Something real. Something I've never actually had. Rosa searched his face. Whatever she found there made her soften slightly. Slow, she said. We go slow. You're still healing. I'm still processing. Miguel needs stability, not another upheaval. Slow. Jonathan nodded. I can do slow. Can you? Because everything I know about you says you run toward things at full speed. Everything you know about the old me, the one who didn't know he was being poisoned by people he trusted. Jonathan's voice dropped. That man is dead. Whoever I'm becoming, he's going to be different. Rosa studied him for another long moment. Then she rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. Light, brief. A promise of something that might grow if given time. Good night, Jonathan. Good night, Rosa. He walked back to his rental car feeling lighter than he had in years. The night air was cool. The stars were visible even through the city haze. And somewhere behind him, a woman who had saved his life was washing dishes with her son. Jonathan Sterling had lost everything. And somehow, impossibly, he had never felt richer. 3 weeks later, the first trial began. Jonathan sat in a federal courtroom watching Captain Morrison avoid his eyes. The man who had sworn to protect and serve. The man Jonathan had trusted since their freshman year at Harvard. The man who had sold him to the highest bidder. How long were you receiving payments from Daniel Sterling? The prosecutor's voice was calm and methodical. Morrison's lawyer objected. Overruled. Morrison shifted in his seat. Approximately 14 months. And what were these payments for? Another objection. Another overruling. The judge was losing patience. Morrison finally looked at Jonathan. Just for a second. Something flickered in his expression. Regret. Shame. Jonathan couldn't tell anymore. Protection. Information. Ensuring that certain investigations didn't go anywhere. What kind of investigations? Missing persons reports, financial irregularities, suspicious medical symptoms. Jonathan's jaw tightened. 14 months. Morrison had been watching him die slowly for over a year, making sure no one asked the right questions. And what about the death of Richard Blackwood, Victoria Sterling's first husband? The courtroom stirred. This was new information. Even Jonathan leaned forward. Morrison's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. We have financial records showing you received $200,000 from an offshore account 3 months after Richard Blackwood's death. The prosecutor held up documents. The same account that paid for Victoria Chen's legal fees during the probate process. Jonathan's blood went cold. Morrison hadn't just helped with his attempted murder. He had helped cover up Victoria's first kill. The prosecutor continued. Were you paid to ensure that Richard Blackwood's death was ruled natural causes, Captain Morrison? Morrison's lawyer exploded with objections. The judge called a recess, and Jonathan sat frozen in his seat, realizing that the conspiracy was even deeper than he had imagined. Rosa found him in the hallway outside the courtroom. You heard? His voice was hollow. I heard. She sat beside him. Morrison helped her kill before. That's why she was so confident it would work again. How many others? Jonathan stared at the floor. How many people did Victoria destroy before me? That's not your question to carry. Isn't it? He looked at her. I married her. I gave her access to everything. If she killed someone after me, it would have been my fault for not stopping her sooner. Rosa took his hand. You didn't know. You couldn't have known. And now she's stopped. That's what matters. Is it enough? Rosa squeezed his fingers. It has to be. Guilt over things you can't change will eat you alive. Trust me. I know. Jonathan wanted to ask what she meant, but the bailiff called everyone back into the courtroom. The moment passed, but he filed it away, another piece of Rosa's story he wanted to understand. The trial continued for 2 more weeks. Morrison eventually broke under the weight of evidence and accepted a plea deal. 30 years in federal prison, no parole. As they led him away, Morrison finally spoke to Jonathan. "I'm sorry." Jonathan stood and faced the man he had once called brother from another mother. "Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught?" Morrison didn't answer, but his silence told Jonathan everything he needed to know. Victoria's trial was different. She didn't break. She didn't apologize. She walked into that courtroom every day in designer clothes, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She smiled at the jury. She cried at the right moments. She was performing the role of her life. "Mrs. Sterling, did you poison your husband?" Victoria dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "I would never hurt Jonathan. I loved him more than anything in this world." "Then how do you explain the arsenic found in his system?" "I can't explain it. Someone must have been targeting him. Maybe a business rival. Maybe someone who wanted to hurt our family." Jonathan watched her lie with the same ease she had used to tell him she loved him every morning for 10 years. The same voice, the same sincerity, the same emptiness behind the performance. "What about Richard Blackwood? Your first husband who died under similar circumstances?" Victoria's tears stopped. Her expression hardened for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Richard had a heart condition. His death was a tragedy that I've never fully recovered from. Medical experts testified that his symptoms were consistent with chronic arsenic poisoning. Experts can be wrong. 2 husbands with identical symptoms, both with substantial wealth, both leaving you as primary beneficiary." Victoria's lawyer objected. Sustained. But the damage was done. The jury was looking at her differently now. Jonathan took the stand on the 4th day. He had been dreading this moment, but Rosa had coached him through it. "Just tell the truth. You don't need to be dramatic. You don't need to be emotional. Just be honest. That's enough." The prosecutor walked him through everything. The symptoms he had dismissed. The morning rituals he had never questioned. The conversation he overheard that night in the study. "She said she doubled the dose in my green juice." Jonathan's voice was steady. "She said no one questions a dead billionaire's heart." "And did you recognize the voice?" "I've been married to that voice for 10 years. Yes, I recognized it." Victoria's lawyer cross-examined him for 3 hours. Tried to paint him as paranoid, unstable, vengeful. Tried to suggest that Rosa had manipulated him for money. Tried to imply that he had fabricated the entire conspiracy. Jonathan answered every question calmly, clearly, without rising to the bait. When it was over, he stepped down from the witness stand and walked past Victoria. She caught his arm. "Jonathan, please." Her whisper was desperate, intimate, the voice she used when she wanted something. "You know I loved you. You know this is all a mistake." Jonathan looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. For the first time, he felt nothing. Not anger, not betrayal, not even pity. Just emptiness where love used to live. "Goodbye, Victoria." He pulled free and walked away. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, Jonathan was sitting between Rosa and Agent Walsh. "On the count of attempted murder in the 1st degree, we find the defendant guilty." Victoria's mask finally cracked. She screamed. She lunged toward the jury box. Bailiffs restrained her while her lawyer shouted objections. "On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty." "On the count of murder in the 1st degree for the death of Richard Blackwood, we find the defendant guilty." Jonathan didn't move. He had expected relief, triumph, satisfaction. Instead, he felt only exhaustion. 10 years of his life exposed as a carefully constructed lie. A woman he had built dreams around, revealed as a predator in pearls. Rosa's hand found his. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like vultures. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward his face. Everyone wanted a piece of the billionaire betrayed by his wife. Jonathan said nothing. He pushed through the crowd with Rosa beside him, ignoring the shouted questions, the demands for statements. The hunger for his pain turned into entertainment. They reached the car, climbed inside, closed the door on the chaos. "It's over," Rosa said quietly. Jonathan stared out the window. "One trial down. Daniel starts next month." "You don't have to attend that one." "Yes, I do." Jonathan's voice was flat. "He's my brother. Whatever else he's become, he's still my blood. I need to look him in the eyes and understand how we ended up here." Rosa didn't argue. She understood that some wounds needed to be faced, not avoided. The drive back to Rosa's neighborhood was silent. Jonathan had been staying in a small apartment nearby, close enough to see her and Miguel regularly, far enough to maintain the slow pace she had requested. When they pulled up to her house, Miguel was waiting on the porch. His expression was dark. "Something's wrong." Rosa tensed immediately. They got out of the car. Miguel met them halfway. "Someone was here." His voice shook with controlled anger. "While you were at court, they left this on the door." He held up a photograph. Rosa snatched it, studied it, and went pale. Jonathan looked over her shoulder. The photograph showed Rosa and Jonathan entering the courthouse that morning. A red X was drawn over Rosa's face. On the back, a single sentence in block letters. "This isn't over." Jonathan's blood turned to ice. "Daniel." "He's in custody," Rosa said. "He can't. He has people, money, connections I don't even know about." Jonathan pulled out his phone and dialed Walsh. "Agent Walsh, someone just threatened Rosa Martinez at her home. A photograph with a death threat. We need protection now." Walsh's response was immediate. "I'm dispatching agents. Don't leave the house. Don't touch the photograph more than you already have." Jonathan hung up and turned to Rosa and Miguel. "Inside, both of you, now." Miguel didn't argue. Rosa hesitated, her eyes scanning the street. "Jonathan, if Daniel is reaching out from custody, that means he has someone on the outside following us, watching us." "I know. We're not safe here." "I know that too." Jonathan guided her toward the house. "But right now, the safest place is together. Walsh will have agents here in 20 minutes. Until then, we stay inside and we stay alert." They locked every door, closed every curtain. Miguel grabbed a baseball bat from his closet and stationed himself by the front window. "If anyone comes near this house," he said grimly, "I'll break their skull." Hopefully it won't come to that. But Jonathan didn't tell him to put the bat down. The 20 minutes felt like hours. Jonathan paced. Rosa called neighbors to ask if they had seen anyone suspicious. Miguel watched the street with the intensity of a soldier. When the federal vehicles finally arrived, Jonathan felt his shoulders drop with relief he hadn't realized he was holding. Agent Walsh stepped out of the lead car, her expression grim. "We swept the area. Whoever left that photograph is gone, but we found something else." She held up an evidence bag. Inside was a burner phone. "This was hidden in your bushes. It received one call today from a number traced to a prepaid phone purchased in Nevada 2 weeks ago." "Who bought it?" "We're working on that, but here's what we know." Walsh's voice dropped. "The call lasted 43 seconds, long enough to confirm your location and receive instructions." Rosa's hand found Jonathan's arm. "Someone has been watching this house for weeks." "It appears so." Walsh turned to Jonathan. "Mr. Sterling, I'm going to recommend that all 3 of you enter protective custody until we identify who's behind this." Miguel exploded. "Protective custody? You mean hiding? Running away?" "I mean staying alive." Walsh's tone left no room for argument. "Your mother helped take down a conspiracy involving a billionaire family and a corrupt police captain. There are people who lost a lot of money and power because of her. Some of those people might want revenge." "Then let them come." Miguel gripped his baseball bat tighter. "I'm not running." Rosa touched her son's shoulder. Mijo, this isn't a game. I know it's not a game, Mom. I know exactly what's at stake. Miguel's eyes were fierce. 7 years ago, I almost died. You saved me. Then you almost died saving him. He nodded toward Jonathan. Now, someone wants to hurt you for doing the right thing. I'm not letting that happen. I don't care if I have to fight every corrupt cop and billionaire in California. Jonathan stepped forward. Miguel, I understand your anger. I share it. But Agent Walsh is right. The smartest thing we can do right now is disappear until they find whoever sent that photograph. And if they never find them, we hide forever. We hide until it's safe. Then we come back and rebuild. Rebuild what? Miguel's voice cracked. My mom has lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. This is our home, our life. And now some rich psychopath is threatening to destroy it because you brought your problems to our door. The accusation landed like a punch. Jonathan absorbed it without defending himself. You're right. His voice was quiet. I brought this to your door. I put your mother in danger. I disrupted your life. And I can't undo any of that. Rosa stepped between them. Miguel, that's enough. No, let him finish. Jonathan held up a hand. He deserves to say what he's feeling. Miguel's jaw trembled. I'm feeling like everything good gets destroyed. Like no matter how hard my mom works, something always comes to tear it apart. And I'm tired. I'm tired of being scared. I'm tired of almost losing her. He lowered the baseball bat. Tears streamed down his face despite his efforts to stop them. Rosa pulled her son into her arms. He resisted for a moment, trying to maintain his tough exterior. Then he collapsed against her, 17 years old, and terrified. Jonathan watched them, his heart breaking for a boy who had already faced too much. I'm going to fix this, he said softly. I don't know how yet, but I swear to both of you, I'm going to make sure no one threatens this family again. Rosa looked at him over Miguel's shoulder. Her expression was unreadable. Family, she repeated. Jonathan didn't look away. Family. Walsh cleared her throat. The safe house is ready. We should move tonight. The next 72 hours were a blur of federal agents, secure locations, and sleepless nights. Jonathan, Rosa, and Miguel were moved to a cabin in the mountains outside Los Angeles, surrounded by armed guards and communication equipment. Jonathan spent most of his time on the phone with lawyers, investigators, anyone who might have information about Daniel's outside connections. The photograph had been a message. The question was, who sent it and what they planned to do next? The answer came on the fourth day. Walsh called at 3 a.m. We got him. Jonathan was instantly awake. Who? Marcus Webb, former Sterling Industries security chief. You fired him 2 years ago for expense fraud. Jonathan searched his memory. Webb, heavy-set man, bad attitude. I remember. He threatened to sue. He did more than threaten. He spent the last 2 years building a network of former employees with grudges against Sterling Industries. When Daniel was arrested, Webb saw an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? To take down the Sterling family permanently. He's been coordinating with Daniel's lawyers, accessing company records through backdoor accounts, and apparently planning something much bigger than a threatening photograph. Jonathan's blood went cold. How big? We found evidence of a plot to attack the courthouse during Daniel's trial. Not just you, the prosecutor, the judge, anyone involved in taking down the conspiracy. Jonathan sat on the edge of his bed, processing the scale of what Walsh was describing. A mass attack, revenge on everyone who had exposed the truth. How close were they to executing? 6 days. The trial starts next week. We think they were planning to move then. And now, Webb is in custody. His network is being dismantled. We've arrested 7 people so far, with more expected. Jonathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It's really over. This particular threat is neutralized. Walsh paused. Walsh. But Mr. Sterling, I need you to understand something. Your family's situation created a lot of enemies. Some we've identified, some we haven't. The threats may become less frequent, but they may never completely disappear. What are you saying? I'm saying that the life you knew before is gone. You can rebuild something new, but it will always require vigilance. The question is whether you're willing to live that way. Jonathan thought about Rosa, about Miguel, about the small house in South Central that had become more of a home than his mansion ever was. I've spent my whole life building things, he said finally. I can learn to protect them too. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Get some sleep, Mr. Sterling. Tomorrow we start preparing for Daniel's trial. It's going to be a long month. She hung up. Jonathan lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in this cabin, Rosa and Miguel were sleeping. Safe, alive, together. He had lost his company, his fortune, his reputation, his brother, his wife, but he had gained something he never knew he needed, a reason to keep fighting. The phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. I heard you talking. Everything okay, Jonathan typed back. They caught the people threatening you. It's over. A pause. Then, come have breakfast with us. Miguel is making pancakes. Jonathan smiled in the darkness. On my way. He got up and walked toward the kitchen, toward the smell of pancakes and coffee and something that felt remarkably like hope. Daniel's trial began on a Monday morning in late October. Jonathan arrived at the courthouse at 7:45 a.m., flanked by federal agents and carrying a weight in his chest that had nothing to do with poison. Rosa had offered to come. He had refused. This is between me and my brother, he told her. Some conversations need to happen without witnesses. She had accepted his decision without argument, but her eyes held worry. Call me. Whatever happens, call me. I will. Now Jonathan stood outside the courtroom, watching his younger brother being led through a side entrance in handcuffs. Daniel looked thinner than before, paler. The arrogance that had always defined him seemed diminished somehow, like a fire burning lower. Their eyes met across the corridor. Daniel smiled. That same smile from childhood, the one that said he knew something you didn't. Jonathan felt his stomach turn. The first 3 days of the trial were procedural. Jury selection, opening statements. The prosecution laying out their case with documents and timelines and financial records that painted Daniel as the architect of a conspiracy years in the making. Jonathan watched from the gallery, learning things about his own brother that made his blood run cold. Daniel had started planning this when Jonathan was 32, 13 years ago. Before Victoria even entered the picture, the defendant began systematically positioning himself within Sterling Industries. The prosecutor explained, displaying corporate records on a screen. He volunteered for positions that gave him access to financial systems. He cultivated relationships with board members who later voted in his favor. He was patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. Jonathan remembered that time differently. He remembered Daniel asking to be more involved in the family business. He remembered feeling proud that his little brother wanted to follow in his footsteps. He remembered giving him chance after chance, promoting him when others suggested caution. He had handed Daniel the keys to the kingdom himself. On the 4th day, the prosecution called their star witness, a name Jonathan didn't recognize. Elena Vasquez. She walked to the stand with the posture of someone who had already decided to burn everything down. Mid-30s, dark hair, eyes that never blinked. Ms. Vasquez, how do you know the defendant? I was his assistant for 6 years, and his lover for 4 of those years. The courtroom erupted. Jonathan gripped the armrest of his seat. He had never heard of this woman, never seen her at company events, never knew she existed. During your relationship with Daniel Sterling, did he discuss his plans regarding his brother? Constantly. Elena's voice was steady, almost clinical. Daniel was obsessed with Jonathan. He talked about him every day, how Jonathan got everything handed to him, how their parents favored him, how the company should have been split equally, but Jonathan took it all. Did Daniel ever mention plans to harm his brother? He didn't call it harm. He called it correction. He said the universe had made a mistake putting Jonathan in charge, and he was going to fix it. Jonathan's hands were shaking. He pressed them against his thighs to still the tremor. When did Victoria Sterling enter the picture? Elena's expression flickered. Something like jealousy, quickly suppressed. Daniel met her at a charity event 5 years ago. He came home that night and told me he had found the perfect weapon. Weapon. That's what he called her. He said Victoria understood how to get close to powerful men. He said she had done it before and gotten away with it. He said together they would take everything Jonathan had. And your reaction to this plan? Elena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice cracked slightly. I loved him. I thought I could change him. I thought if I helped him get what he wanted, he would finally be satisfied. He would finally see me. Did that happen? No. Elena wiped her eye with the back of her hand. Once Victoria was in place, Daniel didn't need me anymore. He discarded me like I was nothing, like I had never existed. The prosecutor let the silence hang. The jury shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Vasquez, you mentioned that Victoria had done this before. Did Daniel provide details? He told me everything. Elena's voice hardened with the bitter satisfaction of revenge. Victoria's first husband, Richard Blackwood. Daniel helped her plan it. He provided the contacts for the poison supplier. He helped her establish the offshore accounts. He coached her on how to play the grieving widow. Jonathan stopped breathing. You're saying Daniel Sterling was involved in the murder of Richard Blackwood? I'm saying Daniel Sterling orchestrated it. Victoria was the instrument. Daniel was the conductor. The courtroom exploded. The judge called for order. Daniel's lawyers leaped to their feet with objections. And Jonathan sat motionless in his seat, feeling the last fragments of his family history crumble to ash. His brother hadn't just conspired to kill him. He had murdered before. He had turned murder into a business model. During the recess, Jonathan found a quiet corner and called Rosa. I heard, she said before he could speak. It's on every news channel. He killed before me. He's been killing for years. I know. Are you okay? Jonathan laughed bitterly. I don't know what okay means anymore. Do you need me there? He closed his eyes. He wanted to say yes. He wanted her beside him, her steady presence anchoring him to something real. But this was his family's wreckage, his burden to witness. Not yet, but soon. I'll be here, whatever you need. Rosa. Yes. Thank you. For everything. For being the one thing in my life that isn't broken. She was quiet for a moment. You're not broken, Jonathan. You're healing. There's a difference. The trial continued for 2 more weeks. Elena's testimony was devastating, but she wasn't the only one. Former employees came forward, business partners who had been threatened, a woman in Vancouver who had supplied the arsenic and was now seeking immunity in exchange for her cooperation. The picture that emerged was of a conspiracy spanning nearly a decade with Daniel at its center, pulling strings like a spider in a web of greed and murder. Through it all, Daniel maintained his composure. He smiled at appropriate moments. He shook his head sadly at accusations. He played the role of the wrongly accused brother with the same skill Victoria had shown in her trial. But on the 15th day, something changed. Jonathan took the stand. The prosecutor walked him through the facts. The night he overheard Victoria and Daniel, the escape with Rosa, the poison, the threats, the photograph that nearly cost them everything. Jonathan answered each question calmly, reciting the events, like a historian documenting someone else's tragedy. Then Daniel's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Mr. Sterling, you claim to have heard your brother conspiring to kill you. Is that correct? Yes. And yet you never confronted him directly. You ran. You hid. You allowed a domestic employee to make decisions about your safety. Rosa Martinez saved my life. I trusted her judgment because everyone else I trusted was trying to kill me. Including your brother. Especially my brother. The lawyer smiled thinly. Mr. Sterling, is it possible that you misheard the conversation that night, that you were already suffering from the effects of poisoning and your perception was compromised? No. Is it possible that your housekeeper, seeing an opportunity to ingratiate herself with a wealthy man, manipulated the situation to her advantage? Jonathan's jaw tightened. Rosa Martinez is the most honest person I have ever known. She risked everything to save me. She wanted nothing in return. Nothing. You've been seen together constantly since this ordeal began. Dinners, family gatherings. Some might say your relationship has become quite intimate. Objection. The prosecutor rose. Relevance. Goes to bias, Your Honor. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Mr. Sterling. Jonathan looked directly at Daniel's lawyer. Yes. Rosa and I have become close. Because when everyone else wanted me dead, she wanted me alive. When everyone else saw a checkbook, she saw a person. If that makes her testimony suspect, then I don't know what credibility means anymore. The lawyer opened his mouth to continue, but Daniel suddenly stood. I want to testify. The courtroom went silent. Daniel's lawyers grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. He shook them off. I want to take the stand. I want to talk to my brother. The judge studied him. Mr. Sterling, your attorneys strongly advise against this. I'm aware of what they advise. I want to testify anyway. The judge looked at the prosecution, then at Daniel's lawyers, then back at Daniel. Very well. The defendant will take the stand. Jonathan returned to the gallery, his heart pounding. Something was wrong. Daniel never made impulsive decisions. Every move he made was calculated. This had to be part of a plan. Daniel settled into the witness chair, adjusted his jacket, and looked directly at Jonathan. Before we begin, I want to say something to my brother. The prosecutor started to object, but the judge waved him down. Go ahead, Mr. Sterling. Daniel took a breath. His mask flickered, showing something raw underneath. Jonathan, do you remember when we were kids? Before Dad got sick? Before Mom started drinking? When we used to build forts in the backyard and pretend we were conquering kingdoms? Jonathan didn't respond. He couldn't. You were always the king in those games. Always. I asked once if I could be king instead, and you laughed. You said, Danny, you're better at building than ruling. Let me handle the kingdom and you handle the construction. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. I was 7 years old, and that was the moment I understood my place in our family. Builder, never ruler. Support structure, never foundation. Mr. Sterling, do you have relevant testimony to offer? The judge's patience was wearing thin. I'm getting there. Daniel's eyes never left Jonathan. When Dad died, he left everything to you. The company, the properties, the legacy. I got a trust fund and a pat on the head. Mom said you were the responsible one, the smart one, the one who could carry the Sterling name into the future. That's not true. Jonathan's voice burst out before he could stop it. I offered you partnership, multiple times. You said you weren't interested. Because partnership with you meant being your subordinate. Daniel's composure cracked completely. Working for you, reporting to you, watching you make decisions about a company that should have been half mine. Do you know what it's like to spend your entire life in someone's shadow, to be told you're equal while being treated like less? So you decided to kill me. Jonathan stood, fists clenched. Because you felt overlooked. I decided to take what should have been mine, Daniel was shouting now. Victoria understood. She knew what it was like to be dismissed, undervalued, treated like an accessory instead of a partner. Together we were going to build something new, something where I wasn't just your little brother. You murdered people, Daniel. Richard Blackwood, you planned to murder me. This isn't about inheritance. This is about something broken inside you. Something you broke. Daniel pointed at Jonathan, his hand trembling. Every success you had was a reminder of my failure. Every article about the great Jonathan Sterling was a knife in my chest. I spent 40 years being your shadow, and I finally found a way to step into the light. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Even the judge seemed frozen by the raw emotion pouring from the witness stand. Jonathan walked forward, ignoring protocol, ignoring the bailiffs who moved to stop him. He stood directly in front of his brother. "I loved you." His voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the room. "You were my little brother. When Mom was drinking, I protected you. When Dad was dying, I held your hand. When you struggled in school, I hired tutors. When you wanted into the company, I created positions for you. Positions beneath you, always beneath you. Because you weren't ready for more." Jonathan's restraint finally broke. "I was trying to teach you, trying to prepare you. If you had waited, if you had trusted me, the company would have been yours eventually. I never wanted to do this forever. I wanted to retire at 50 and hand everything to you." Daniel's face went blank. "What?" "The succession plan. I drew it up 3 years ago. You were named as my replacement. Full control. Everything. I was going to announce it on my 50th birthday. 5 years from now." Daniel stared at him. Something shifted in his expression. Shock. Disbelief. And underneath it something that looked horrifyingly like despair. "You're lying." "Ask my lawyers. Ask the board. The documents exist. They're in my private files." Jonathan's voice broke. "You were always going to get everything, Daniel. All you had to do was wait." Daniel sank back in the witness chair. His entire body seemed to deflate. No, that can't be right. Victoria said, she said you would never share. She said the only way was to take it. Victoria told you what you wanted to hear, what you needed to hear to justify what she was planning to do. She used your resentment like a weapon. She pointed you at me and pulled the trigger." Daniel's hands covered his face. His shoulders shook. The arrogance, the calculation, the years of careful planning all collapsed into something broken and human. "Oh God." His voice was muffled by his hands. "Oh God, what did I do?" The courtroom remained frozen. No one knew how to respond to a confession delivered through sobs. Jonathan stood before his brother, feeling something he didn't expect. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Pity. "I forgive you." Daniel's head snapped up. "What?" "I forgive you for trying to kill me. I forgive you for Victoria. I forgive you for Richard Blackwood and everyone else who suffered because of your choices." "How can you possibly?" "Because holding on to this anger will destroy me the same way your resentment destroyed you." Jonathan's voice was steady now, carrying the weight of a decision made in his soul. "But forgiveness doesn't mean freedom. You have to face the consequences of what you did. You have to pay for the lives you ruined. And you have to live with the knowledge of what you threw away." Daniel stared at his brother. Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry." The words came out like a wound opening. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan. For everything. I know you are. Now." Jonathan turned and walked back to the gallery. The judge called a recess. Bailiffs helped Daniel down from the stand. The jury filed out their faces, marked with the emotional devastation they had witnessed. Rosa was waiting outside the courtroom when Jonathan emerged. "I saw it on the news." She pulled him into an embrace. "All of it." Jonathan held on to her, feeling the tremors he had suppressed finally working through his body. He didn't know about the succession plan. He threw everything away for something he was already going to get. Victoria manipulated him. She found his weakness and exploited it. He still made choices. He still hurt people. Yes. Rosa pulled back and looked at him. "But you chose to forgive him. That says everything about who you are." Jonathan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my family was wrong." "Then you get to decide who you become next." Rosa took his hand. "That's not a curse, Jonathan. That's a gift." The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Jonathan waited in a small room with Rosa, drinking bad coffee and trying not to watch the clock. Agent Walsh checked in periodically with updates that weren't really updates. At 9:47 p.m., word came that a verdict had been reached. Jonathan walked back into the courtroom for the last time. Daniel was already seated, his face blank with exhaustion and something that might have been acceptance. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. Daniel didn't react. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Still nothing. On the count of first-degree murder for the death of Richard Blackwood, we find the defendant guilty. Daniel closed his eyes. A single tear traced down his cheek. The judge set sentencing for the following month. Life in prison was expected. Daniel Sterling would never see freedom again. As bailiffs led him away, Daniel paused beside Jonathan. "Take care of Mom," he whispered. "She doesn't know about any of this yet. Someone should tell her gently." Jonathan realized with a jolt that he hadn't thought about their mother once during this entire ordeal. She lived in a facility in Arizona, her mind faded by Alzheimer's. She probably didn't remember she had sons at all. "I'll visit her," Jonathan said. "I'll make sure she's comfortable." Daniel nodded once. Then he was gone, disappearing through a door that would separate them for the rest of their lives. Rosa found Jonathan standing alone in the empty courtroom an hour later. "It's over," she said softly. "Is it?" Jonathan stared at the witness stand where his brother had broken down. "Victoria is in prison. Daniel is going to prison. Morrison is already in prison. The conspiracy is dismantled, but it doesn't feel like anything is resolved. That's because resolution isn't a feeling, it's a choice." Jonathan turned to face her. "What do you mean?" Rosa sat beside him. "My husband left when Miguel was 3 years old. No warning, no explanation. Just gone one morning. For years I waited for resolution, for him to come back and explain, for some kind of closure. Did you get it?" "No, he died in a car accident 2 years later. Never contacted us once." Rosa's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes held old pain. "I learned that resolution doesn't come from other people. It comes from deciding to move forward anyway, from choosing to build something new instead of waiting for the old wounds to heal on their own." Jonathan reached for her hand. "Is that what you did? Moved forward? I raised my son. I worked 3 jobs. I saved enough to keep a roof over our heads and food on our table. And one day I woke up and realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not because anything had been resolved, because I had built a life that was bigger than the pain." Jonathan squeezed her fingers. "You're the strongest person I've ever met." Rosa smiled. "I'm a mother. It's the same thing." They sat together in the empty courtroom until a bailiff gently informed them the building was closing. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. Stars were visible despite the city lights. "What happens now?" Rosa asked. Jonathan thought about everything he had lost. His company, his fortune, his family, his marriage, his identity. Then he thought about what he had found. A woman who saw him clearly, a boy who challenged him, a chance to become someone different. Now, Jonathan looked at Rosa. "Now I learn how to live without everything I thought I needed. And maybe I find out what actually matters." "That sounds like a good start." They walked toward the parking lot together, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Halfway to the car, Jonathan stopped. "Rosa." "Yes." "I want to do something. Something that might seem crazy." Rosa raised an eyebrow. "More crazy than everything we've already been through. Different crazy." Jonathan took a breath. "I want to use whatever money I have left to help people. Not through foundations or galas or tax-deductible donations. Really help, the way you helped me." "What does that look like?" "I don't know yet. Maybe a clinic in your neighborhood. Maybe a fund for families facing medical emergencies they can't afford. Maybe something else entirely." Jonathan met her eyes. "I just know I don't want to rebuild my old life. I want to build something that matters." Rosa studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "I know a good place to start," she said. "Where?" "My community center. They're about to lose their funding. The building needs repairs. The programs are getting cut. 300 kids depend on that place for after-school care. How much do they need? More than you probably have left. Jonathan laughed. Then I'll find more, somehow. Rosa shook her head. You really have changed. Is that a good thing? Ask me in a year. She started walking again. For now, let's go home. Miguel is waiting, and he made enchiladas. Home. The word had never meant anything real to Jonathan before. It had been an address, a building, a place to sleep between meetings. Now it meant something else entirely. Jonathan followed Rosa to the car, leaving the courthouse behind him. The trials were over. The conspiracies were exposed. The family he thought he had was destroyed. But somewhere in the ruins, something new was beginning to grow. And for the first time in his life, Jonathan Sterling couldn't wait to see what it would become. 6 months passed faster than Jonathan thought possible. The community center reopened on a Saturday morning in April. Jonathan stood at the entrance watching children pour through the doors, their laughter echoing off walls that had been repainted, through rooms that had been renovated, past equipment that had been replaced. Rosa appeared beside him. 347 kids registered for the summer program. That's more than they've ever had. Good. Jonathan's voice was thick. That's good. You did this. We did this. He turned to face her. I wrote checks. You convinced the community to trust a billionaire who showed up out of nowhere wanting to help. Rosa smiled. Former billionaire. Details. The truth was more complicated than either of them acknowledged. Jonathan's remaining fortune had been tied up in legal battles for months. Sterling Industries was in chaos, the board fighting over control while federal investigators picked through the wreckage of Daniel's conspiracy. Jonathan's personal accounts had finally been unfrozen 2 weeks ago, revealing far less than he expected. $87 million. A fortune by any normal standard, a fraction of what he once controlled. He had spent $32 million on the community center. Rosa had called him insane. Miguel had called him an idiot. Agent Walsh had called him financially irresponsible. Jonathan had called it a beginning. Mr. Sterling. A young woman approached, clipboard in hand. The mayor's office called again. They want to schedule a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Tell them no ceremony. This isn't about photo opportunities. They're insisting. They say it's good press for the city. Jonathan looked at the children racing past, at the parents signing registration forms, at the staff members who had jobs again because someone decided their work mattered. Tell them, if they want good press, they can fund the next community center themselves. The woman nodded and hurried away. Rosa raised an eyebrow. You could have been more diplomatic. I could have. I didn't want to. The old Jonathan Sterling would have taken that meeting, would have used it for connections, influence, leverage. The old Jonathan Sterling was being poisoned by his wife and betrayed by his brother. I don't want to be him anymore. Rosa touched his arm. Who do you want to be instead? Before Jonathan could answer, Miguel burst through the entrance doors. His face was flushed with excitement. Mom, Jonathan, you need to see this, now. They followed him through the community center to a back room that had been converted into a computer lab. 20 teenagers sat at new workstations, headphones on fingers flying across keyboards. What is this? Rosa asked. Coding class. Miguel's pride was unmistakable. I designed the curriculum. These kids are learning to build apps, create websites, develop software. In 6 months, they'll have skills that can get them jobs. Jonathan studied the faces in the room, focused, determined. Kids who reminded him of himself at that age, hungry for something more than what their circumstances offered. This wasn't in the renovation plan, he said quietly. I added it. Miguel met his eyes without flinching. Used leftover materials and convinced some tech companies to donate old equipment. Didn't cost you anything extra. Jonathan looked at this 17-year-old who had once threatened him with a baseball bat. This boy who had accused him of bringing danger to their door. This young man, who had somehow become family without either of them planning it. You did this on your own. I had help. But yeah, the idea was mine. Why? Miguel was quiet for a moment. Because someone gave me a chance when I was dying. Someone paid for surgery that saved my life and never asked for anything back. I figured maybe I could do the same thing. Give other kids a chance. See what they do with it. Rosa's eyes were glistening. She pulled her son into an embrace that he pretended to resist. Jonathan watched them, feeling something shift in his chest. This was what mattered. Not the money he had lost, not the company he had built, not the name that used to open every door. This, connection, purpose, love that didn't come with conditions. Miguel, he said when Rosa finally released her son, I want to expand this program, not just here, other community centers, other neighborhoods. Would you be interested in helping design that? Miguel's composure cracked. For a moment, he looked like the 8-year-old boy who had nearly died, overwhelmed by something too big to process. You're serious. I'm serious. You understand these kids better than I ever could. You know what they need. I can provide resources. You can provide direction. Miguel looked at his mother. She nodded once, her face glowing with pride. Yeah. Miguel's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Yeah, I'm interested. Jonathan extended his hand. Miguel took it. Partners, Jonathan said. Partners. Rosa wiped her eyes. If you two are done with your business meeting, there's still a grand opening happening. People want to meet the mysterious benefactor. I'm not mysterious. I'm just trying not to make this about me. Too late. Rosa took his arm. You're the former billionaire who saved a community center instead of buying a yacht. That makes you fascinating whether you like it or not. They walked back through the center past basketball courts and art rooms and a new kitchen where volunteers were preparing lunch for anyone who needed it. Jonathan shook hands with parents who thanked him. He listened to children who showed him drawings they had made. He accepted hugs from elderly residents who remembered when this center was the heart of their community and had watched it slowly die. It was exhausting. It was overwhelming. It was everything he had been missing his entire life. At noon, Jonathan stepped outside for air. His phone buzzed. Agent Walsh. Sterling, we need to talk. Jonathan's stomach tightened. What happened? Victoria's lawyers filed an appeal. They're claiming the trial was compromised by prejudicial media coverage. Is it going anywhere? Probably not. But there's something else. Walsh paused. She wants to see you. Victoria. She's requesting a meeting at the prison. Jonathan leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Why? She says she has information about your family, things you don't know. She's manipulating. It's what she does. Probably, but I thought you should know. Walsh's voice softened slightly. You don't have to go. There's no legal requirement, no obligation. Jonathan closed his eyes. Victoria's face appeared in his memory. The smile she wore while poisoning him. The tears she cried at his public events. The mask that never slipped until the very end. What could she possibly tell me that matters? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. The choice is yours. Jonathan hung up. He stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the question. Rosa found him 20 minutes later. You disappeared. Victoria wants to see me. Rosa's expression didn't change, but her body tensed. Whenever I'm willing. Are you? Jonathan turned to face her. I don't know. She says she has information about my family. Things I don't know. She's a murderer and a liar. Whatever she tells you will be designed to hurt you. I know. Then why are you even considering it? Jonathan searched for words. Because part of me still doesn't understand. 10 years. 10 years of marriage. I thought I knew her. I thought she loved me. And I was wrong about everything. If I don't try to understand how that happened, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. "I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that some questions don't have answers. Some people can't be understood because there's nothing underneath the mask but hunger." "You think Victoria is like that?" "I think Victoria saw you as prey from the beginning. I think she studied you, learned your weaknesses, and designed herself to be exactly what you needed. There was never a real person behind the performance, just appetite wearing human skin." Jonathan shuddered. "That's terrifying." "That's truth." Rosa took his hand. "Go see her if you need to, but don't expect closure, and don't let her into your head again." Jonathan made the decision 3 days later. The prison was federal high-security gray in ways that had nothing to do with color. Jonathan passed through checkpoints and metal detectors and doors that clanged shut behind him with sounds like coffin lids. Victoria was waiting in a visitation room. Orange jumpsuit, hair pulled back, no makeup, no jewelry, no mask. She smiled when she saw him. "Jonathan, you came." He sat across from her, a table between them that felt like an ocean. "You said you had information. Always straight to business. I used to love that about you. So focused, so driven." Victoria's smile turned sad. "Do you remember our honeymoon Greece? That little villa overlooking the water? You said it was the happiest you'd ever been." "I remember." "Were you happy, really?" Jonathan considered the question. "I thought I was. Now I don't know what I felt. Everything from that time is contaminated by knowing what you were planning." Victoria nodded slowly. "That's fair. I contaminated a lot of things." "Why did you want to see me?" "Because I'm dying." Jonathan froze. "What?" "Ovarian cancer. Stage 4. They found it during a routine exam last month." Victoria's voice was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. 6 months, maybe less. The prison medical staff aren't exactly Mayo Clinic quality." Jonathan didn't know what to feel. He had imagined Victoria suffering many times. He had never imagined this. "I'm sorry," Victoria laughed. "Are you really?" "I don't know. I'm surprised that I might be." "That's more honest than I expected." Victoria leaned forward. "I wanted to tell you something before I die. Something true. Maybe the first true thing I've ever told you." Jonathan waited. "I did love you." Victoria's eyes glistened. "Not at first. At first you were exactly what Daniel said. A target. A mark. A stepping stone to money and power. But somewhere along the way something changed." "Don't." "I need to say this." Victoria's voice cracked. "The mornings when you brought me coffee before I was awake. The nights when you held me after nightmares. The way you looked at me like I was precious, like I mattered, like I was more than what I could do for you." "Stop." No one had ever looked at me that way before. And I started to feel things I wasn't supposed to feel. Real things. Things that made the plan harder. Jonathan's hands were shaking. "Then why didn't you stop? If you loved me, why did you keep poisoning me?" "Because I was more afraid of Daniel than I was in love with you." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. "He knew things about me. Things that would put me in prison anyway. The first husband wasn't my idea. Daniel found me after Richard's death. He knew what I had done. He used it to control me." "You're saying Daniel forced you to marry me." "I'm saying Daniel gave me a choice. Do what he wanted or spend the rest of my life in prison." Victoria wiped her eyes. "I chose survival. I always choose survival. Even when it costs me everything." Jonathan stood. He walked to the small window and stared at nothing. "Daniel confessed in court. He said he was the architect. He said you were willing." "Daniel said what suited Daniel. He always did." Victoria's voice hardened. "I'm not claiming innocence. I killed Richard Blackwood. I poisoned you for 6 months. I deserve to be here. But the idea that I was the mastermind while Daniel was the reluctant participant is a lie. He wrote the playbook. I just followed it. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. I've lied to you constantly for 10 years. But I'm dying, Jonathan. I have nothing left to gain. No appeals that will succeed. No deals to make. I just wanted you to know that somewhere underneath all the manipulation, there was something real. Jonathan turned back to face her. This woman who had shared his bed while plotting his death. This woman who had kissed him goodbye every morning while counting down to his funeral. Do you remember the night you saved me? He asked quietly. The night Rosa pulled me into that closet and I heard you talking to Daniel. Victoria nodded. You said I was pathetic. You said I thanked you for poisoning me. You laughed about it. I remember. That's the real you. Not this performance of regret. Not these tears that you've probably practiced for weeks. The real Victoria is the woman who laughed while I was dying. Victoria's face crumbled. For the first time, Jonathan saw something genuine in her expression. Pain, shame, the weight of choices that could never be undone. You're right. Her voice was barely a whisper. I am that woman. I've always been that woman. But I wanted to be something else. With you, I wanted to be something else. I just didn't know how. Jonathan walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. I forgave Daniel because he was my brother. Because despite everything, I could see the broken child underneath the monster. He turned to look at her one last time. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I can stop hating you. That will have to be enough. Jonathan. Goodbye, Victoria. He walked out and didn't look back. Rosa was waiting outside the prison. She took one look at his face and pulled him into an embrace. That bad? She's dying. Cancer. 6 months. Rosa was silent for a long moment. How do you feel? Empty. Confused. A little sick. Jonathan pulled back. She said she loved me, that it started as a con but became real. Do you believe her? I don't know. I don't think it matters. Jonathan took a breath. Whether she loved me or not, she still chose to destroy me. Love that doesn't stop you from hurting someone isn't really love. It's just another form of possession. Rosa touched his face. That might be the wisest thing you've ever said. I had a good teacher. They walked to the car together. Jonathan felt lighter somehow, as if leaving that prison had also meant leaving behind a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. Take me home, he said. Rosa smiled. Which home? The apartment. The community center. My house. Jonathan thought about it. Wherever Miguel is making dinner. He's making his grandmother's tamales tonight. Been working on them since this morning. Then that's home. 3 months later, Jonathan stood before a gathering of 200 people. The Miguel Martinez Community Foundation was officially launching. Named for a boy who had almost died and grown into a young man determined to help others survive. Miguel stood beside him, uncomfortable in a suit, but refusing to leave the stage. I'm not good at speeches, Jonathan said into the microphone. For most of my life, I paid people to write them for me, but today I want to speak for myself. He looked at Rosa in the front row. She nodded encouragement. A year ago, I had everything. A company worth billions, a mansion with 47 rooms, a wife who I thought loved me, a brother I trusted completely. I had power, influence, a name that opened every door. The crowd was silent. And then I discovered that almost all of it was a lie. My wife was poisoning me. My brother wanted me dead. The people I trusted most in the world were counting down to my funeral. Jonathan's voice cracked. He steadied himself. I should have died. I would have died. Except for one person. A woman who cleaned my house. A woman I barely noticed for 7 years. A woman who saw the truth when I was blind and risked everything to save a man who had never really seen her. He found Rosa's eyes. She was crying. Rosa Martinez taught me something that all my money and success never could. She taught me that real wealth isn't about what you own. It's about who stands beside you when everything collapses. It's about love that doesn't come with conditions. It's about being seen for who you actually are, not what you can provide. Miguel shifted beside him. Jonathan put a hand on his shoulder. And her son Miguel taught me something else. He taught me that the best way to honor a second chance is to give second chances to others. Every dollar in this foundation exists because a 17-year-old boy decided that saving his own life wasn't enough. He wanted to save others too. Jonathan looked at the crowd. Former employees who had remained loyal. Community members who had welcomed him despite his wealth. Friends who had formed in the strangest circumstances. The Miguel Martinez Community Foundation will fund healthcare for families who can't afford it, education for children who deserve better, programs for communities that have been forgotten. We will do this not as charity from on high, but as partners standing shoulder to shoulder. He paused. I can't undo the damage my family caused. I can't bring back the lives lost to greed and manipulation, but I can spend whatever time I have left trying to build something worthy of the second chance I was given. Jonathan stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slowly, then built to something overwhelming. People rose to their feet. Rosa pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around him. Miguel joined them a moment later, the three of them holding each other, while the room thundered with appreciation. That night, after the guests had gone and the venue had emptied, Jonathan walked along the beach with Rosa and Miguel. The Pacific stretched before them, endless and dark stars scattered across the sky like promises. You did good today, Miguel said. Even I got a little emotional. Don't tell anyone. Your secret is safe. Rosa slipped her hand into Jonathan's. What happens now? Now we keep building. The foundation is just the start. There's so much more we can do. I meant with us. Rosa stopped walking. You. Me. Whatever this is. Jonathan turned to face her. The moonlight caught her features, illuminating a face he had memorized over months of conversation and silence, and moments that felt more intimate than anything in his previous life. I love you. The words came out simply, without hesitation. I should have said it months ago. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of contaminating something pure with my history. Of bringing the darkness from my old life into your light. Rosa laughed softly. Jonathan, I'm not light. I'm a woman who raised a son alone, worked 3 jobs, and almost died saving a man I barely knew. I have plenty of darkness. Then we're well matched. She rose on her toes and kissed him. Not the careful kisses they had shared before. Something deeper. Something that tasted like commitment. Miguel cleared his throat loudly. Still here, standing right here, witnessing all of this. Rosa laughed against Jonathan's lips. Get used to it. I'm going for a walk, a very long walk. Don't wait up. He wandered down the beach, leaving them alone with the waves and the stars, and a future neither of them had expected. Jonathan held Rosa close. Marry me. She pulled back, eyes wide. What? Not now. Not soon. Whenever you're ready. But I want you to know that this isn't temporary for me. This isn't gratitude or trauma bonding or whatever else people might call it. This is the realest thing I've ever felt. Rosa stared at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing. What? 6 months ago you were a billionaire I barely knew. Now you're proposing on a beach after giving away most of your money to name a foundation after my son. Is that a yes? It's a, you're insane and I love you and we'll talk about it tomorrow. I'll take it. They walked back along the beach together, finding Miguel sitting on a rock and pretending not to watch them approach. Everything sorted? He asked. Getting there, Rosa said. Good, because I've been thinking. Miguel stood up. The coding program is doing well, but it's not enough. These kids need mentors, real professionals who can show them what's possible. I want to create an internship pipeline, partner with tech companies, give these kids access to careers they never imagined. Jonathan smiled. Write a proposal. I'll fund whatever makes sense. Already started it. Miguel pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Figured I should be ready when you said yes. Jonathan took the paper. Even in the darkness, he could see that it was detailed, professional, ambitious. You're going to change the world someday, he said. That's the plan. Miguel started walking toward the car. Now come on, it's late and I'm hungry. I'm thinking tacos. Rosa shook her head. My son, the humanitarian, wants to save the world but needs tacos first. Priorities, Mom. Priorities. They climbed into Jonathan's car, a modest sedan he had purchased after selling the last of his luxury vehicles. Miguel sat in the back, already texting friends about the night. Rosa sat beside Jonathan, her hand resting on his knee. As they drove through streets that had once seemed foreign and now felt like home, Jonathan realized something that had been building for months. He wasn't the same man who had stumbled out of that mansion a year ago, poisoned and betrayed and broken. That man had defined himself by wealth, status, power. That man had measured success in dollars and influence. The man driving this car with this woman beside him and this boy in the back seat measured success differently. In lives touched. In communities strengthened. In love earned rather than purchased. He had lost everything he thought he wanted. He had found everything he actually needed. Rosa squeezed his knee. You're quiet. Just thinking. About what? Jonathan glanced at her, then at Miguel in the rearview mirror, then back at the road ahead. About how wrong I was. About everything. I spent my whole life building walls, accumulating things, protecting myself from loss by making sure I never needed anyone. And now I understand that the walls weren't protecting me. They were imprisoning me. The things I accumulated were weighing me down. And the worst losses of my life turned out to be the best things that ever happened to me. Miguel leaned forward. That's either very profound or very cheesy. I can't decide which. Both, Rosa said. Definitely both. Jonathan laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere deep and true. Tacos, he asked. Tacos. They agreed in unison. The car continued through the night, carrying 3 people who had found each other through tragedy and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Behind them, the ghosts of the past grew smaller with every mile. Ahead of them, the future waited full of possibility and purpose, and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. Jonathan Sterling had learned the hardest lesson of his life in the strangest possible way. He had discovered that some truths can only be found in the darkness. That some blessings only arrive disguised as disasters. That the people who matter most are often the ones we overlook until they become the reason we survive. Rosa had saved his life. Miguel had given it meaning. And together they had shown him what wealth really looked like, not in the zeros on a bank statement, not in the size of a house or the prestige of a name. Wealth was sitting in a modest car with people who loved him for who he was becoming, not who he had been. Wealth was having a purpose bigger than profit. Wealth was belonging somewhere, truly belonging for the first time in his entire life. Jonathan reached for Rosa's hand. She laced her fingers through his without looking as natural as breathing. Miguel put his headphones on and leaned back, probably already dreaming of code and careers and kids whose lives he would change. The road stretched ahead, dark and unknown, full of challenges they couldn't predict. And Jonathan Sterling, who had once owned everything and known nothing, finally understood what it meant to have it all. Not the empire, not the fortune, not the name. Just this. Just them. Just love that had grown from the ashes of betrayal. That was enough. That was everything. And for the first time in 45 years, Jonathan Sterling knew exactly who he was meant to be.